Amen. Caleb, could you bring me the handheld microphone? I'm going to need that during my talk here. Oh, welcome. Happy Sabbath. It's good to see our visitors here. Isley's joined us this morning. Got two Nathans in the house this morning. It's good to see. Welcome. Hope you get a blessing this morning. Science. Science is such a... Unfortunately, it's used in such a sterile term today. You think of laboratories and white coats and things like that, but science is the smell of flowers in the springtime, taste of a nice hot fudge sundae, or a hot chocolate on a cold winter day. But science is wonderful. It's one of the best things to study. Last time I talked, I spoke about the fascinating astronomy that we have, the stars and the galaxies. And this time, we're going to go a different direction. And I'm going to see if this works. Do we not have... Did you push the right button? You must have duplicate. Hold on. I had to put in a new video card this week, and I didn't check it with the PowerPoint first. So anyways, the previous sermon I talked about the vastness of space, and now we're going to go a little bit inside. We know that God is our creator. As we look at space, and as we come to the idea of heaven, we know in Psalms 33:6 it says, "By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and the breath of his mouth all other host." Nehemiah 9:6 says, "You alone are the Lord. You have made the heavens, the heaven of heavens with all their host, the earth and all that is in it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to all of them, and the heavenly host bows down before you." As we look at these scriptures in creation, what are we told was the crowning act of creation? Creation of mankind. As we look at that picture, imagine what it would be like that moment of creation where God knelt down to conform the earth into the shape of Adam. It's kind of curious as you look at it. These scriptures that refer to the giving of life. In Genesis 2:7, it says, "Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the earth, dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being." Now, I'm going to make some references here coming up, but an interesting thing that I found in Bible reference is that God spoke the worlds into existence, but he breathed life into existence. So it seems like the Bible reference to inanimate objects is that God created through his word, but animate objects, those things that are living, God breathed. They all contain the breath of life. Right? So as we look at the building blocks of life, I'd like to read this from the Spirit of Prophecy here. "Upon all created things is seen the impress of the deity. Nature testifies of God. The susceptible mind, brought into contact with the miracle and mystery of the universe, cannot but recognize the working of infinite power. Not by its own inherent energy does the earth produce its bounties, and year by year continue its motion around the sun. An unseen hand guides the planets in their circuit of the heavens. A mysterious life pervades all nature, a life that sustains the unnumbered worlds throughout immensity, that lives in the insect atom which floats in the summer breeze, that wings the flight of the swallow and feeds the young ravens which cry, that bring the bud to blossom and the flower to fruit. The same power that upholds nature is working also in man. The same great laws that guide alike the stars and the atom control human life. The laws that govern the heart's action, regulating the flow of the current of life to the body, are the laws of the mighty intelligence that has jurisdiction of the soul. From him, all life proceeds." Isn't that awesome? Our Creator. So Genesis 2:7, that reference. "Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being." So what did he form? You know, you get that childlike view in your mind that he took a bunch of dirt and put it together and there's this clay figure, right? But what did he form? I mean, look at the form that we have within us, right? Hierarchy of living things. Well, if you start at the outside, it's the human body, right? The next thing you have is the body's systems, right? Skeletal system, digestive system, vascular system, nervous system, muscular system, reproductive system. The only one of those that we might live without a decent life would be the reproductive system. The rest is essential for a normal life, isn't it? Even the reproductive system is important. Right? But any one of those, they all have to work in tandem together. Like your computer, if it's not in sync, if its parts aren't working together, it crashes, right? Same with your body. Everything has to work together, right? So the other thing that as you go from the human body down to the body systems, now Dr. Bray's going to give me a review of this after I'm done here. Then you have the tissues that make up the systems, make up the organs, right? You have the body systems, then the organs, then you have the tissues, muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, connective tissue, nervous tissue. And what are all these things, what are all the tissues made of? Tell me. Huh? Cells, yeah. Cells. Basic biology, right? All your body is made out of cells. So, in your body, they're figured out now the average is 37.2 trillion cells in your body. All right? Let me read something to you here. The Old Testament says the life is in the blood, but it has a far deeper significance than is obvious fact that major blood loss leads to death. Blood could be the very essence of life itself. The heart pumps 9,000 liters of blood along 60,000 miles of tubing every day. Yes, I really do mean over twice the circumference of the earth every day. It does this to supply vital fluids to every living cell. Just as important is to remove toxic waste like carbon dioxide. One single drop of blood contains 250 million red cells. If you were to stack all 25 trillion of red blood cells on top of each other, they would measure 31,000 miles long. The bone marrow has to make 2 million new ones every second, as they only live 120 days. But in that short lifetime, each one will have traveled 75,000 times around your body. As you know, their chief job is to carry oxygen. Hemoglobin is an amazing molecule of 10,000 atoms with iron at its center. It powerfully binds to oxygen when traveling through your lungs, but graciously gives it up when it meets a cell desperate for the breath of fresh air. If you were to stack every cell in your body on top of itself, every cell, it would reach 61 light years away. Now remember, light travels 186,000 miles a second. So the number of cells that you have in your body, if you were to string them on top of each other, it would reach 61 light years. And guess what? Those cells need to work in harmony. Those cells have a life of their own. Right? Here's an interesting one, brain cells. Now, if you ever get a chance to see The Secret Life of the Brain, it's a public PBS publication, but it's an excellent DVD series. It talks about, I'm focusing on these cells. These are neurons. And what they did is they took a child in the womb, and the first thing that's formed is the backbone. And out of the backbone, this bubble forms in the spine, and it's the brain starting to build. And this is the fascinating thing that I found about it. You see those cables in there? Those are all called glial cells, right? But their glial cells are like guy wires for the neurons to travel on, okay? Now you think about the billions of cells that are in your brain. This is fascinating. They did a study about 12 years ago to whether they're programmed to go in a specific spot, or science used to think that they just took and all these nerves went to one spot, boom, they developed with each other and then got their instructions. But what they did, this is fascinating, they took one of those neurons just that had been produced, and they switched it over to another guy wire to see if it would just join along with the other group, because they go out in groups. Do you know that little neuron guided itself over to its original group and went out to where it was supposed to be? Isn't that amazing? That's just amazing. How does it know to do that? You know, it had to have some sort of correction in it, and knew where it was going. It had to go back over to its original path. And by the way, your trek from where it has to start to the edge of the brain is bigger than a trip across the United States, which it doesn't even have a map or has never been to before. You know, it's fascinating. Well, you know, all this newer stuff came with discoveries. The discovery of the microscope, right? Each new technology reveals something more. You know, we have the Hubble Space Telescope, right? It can see farther than we've ever seen before, but you know what? There's still more. You know, we went from a microscope, an optical microscope, to an electron microscope. You know what? There's still more, right? There is so much that we haven't discovered yet, and the amount that we have is mind-numbing, right? You could study all day long and never come to a 10 or 5% of what knowledge that we have today, and it's growing. Our knowledge is growing by leaps and bounds. You know, I used to think, well, how can we spend all eternity learning? Now I'm like, wow, I think I'll need all eternity to learn. Right? What does God have prepared for us? Yeah, I hid my notes here. I got to bring them back out. Okay, as we go through this idea, how big is big? Right? How small is small? Right? At one point, is there an end? I don't know. You know, they really thought, like I talked about last time, there were several scientists that said, with the next development, we're going to discover the edge of space. Well, it never happened, right? It hasn't happened yet. I've got a little video clip here. It's kind of interesting. It kind of puts this in perspective. Caleb, where's the wireless microphone, or the cordless? I need the handheld. This was, now that we have, if you ever had the opportunity to use Google Earth and be able to back out and see the different countries and continents and everything, this takes it to the extreme. This was done at the, I forget which university, but you'll see it here. Oh, Caleb, you're going to have to click on it, I guess. Hit enter. Oh, don't tell me it's not going to work. Well, that's a disappointment. I might forward it to you guys, or yeah, I'll show it to you at a different time. But basically what they do is they take a picture of this lady in California, and they back out. It shows you all the surrounding Yahoo and Google and all that, and they back out, and then you see the United States, and they back out, and you see the world, then you back out, and you see all the solar system. And what's fascinating that I didn't know, I had studied astronomy, but I didn't know this, but around the solar system there's a cloud. And that cloud is created just like we have an atmosphere on Earth. The sun has an atmosphere on it. Right? And as you back out from the sun, then you can see all the different stars and Pleiades and all this, and you get out to what they show as the known universe, right? And then they go back in to the lady laying on the ground, and then they go into her iris, they go into her blood vessel, and they point out a white blood cell, and in the white blood cell they show some of the organelles, and inside those organelles are atoms. And inside the atoms, there, of course, are protons, neutrons, electrons. And then inside that, you get the quarks. And now they've gone way below that as far as how much they've discovered. But here's the limitation, right? Hubble's telescope works on one thing, light, right? You have to have something that you can see. There has to be enough energy to be able to gather on the lens of the Hubble telescope. Well, the opposite is also true. The electron microscope can only see so far because there's stuff that's smaller than electrons. Electron microscope is, optical microscope is when you put in light and photons bounce off and come back to your sight so that you can see what's there. Electron microscope works somewhat the same way, except it's more shadow imaging, but it's shooting electrons at an object and it forms an outside to it. Well, if you have something smaller than an electron, you're not going to be able to see it. So there's limitations from what we have so far. We have a community of life within cells. We've got the cell membrane making up the outside. You've got microtubules making up the structure on the inside. Cytosol is like the aqueous liquid within the cell, one of the liquids. Then you have the nucleus, which contains the DNA and is the brain of the cell. You have the mitochondria, which is the engine of the cell. You have the endoplasmic reticulum, which takes care of storage and creation of some of the stuff in the cell. You have the ribosome that takes the RNA and the amino acids, and it forms proteins through a synthesis. You have lysosomes, which are responsible for they're the deconstruction people. They're the ones that take apart stuff that's either been used and they need to reuse it. So it's like a recycling program, right? The vacuoles and the vesicles are all transport vehicles. They're sacks of proteins or whatever needs to be transported. Then you have the motor transports, and that's, unfortunately, that was the best thing I wanted to show you. The motor transports, I can describe it to you. I might actually go back right at the end and just flip it up on the screen from YouTube, but it's one of those, it's really fascinating if you can see some of the life that's inside the cell. I mean, the microtubules, if you can imagine this being the inside of the cell, microtubules would be like cables going up from the floor to different things, but there's a centriole, there's a point where they all attach, and the cables go to different areas where proteins and stuff need to be delivered. Now these little motor transports are really cool because they have one hand that they grab this big sack of vesicle or vascule with, and then they have 2 feet, and they walk up this cable, pulling this stuff, and they deliver it maybe to the cell membrane, and when it gets to the cell membrane, it bursts through the cell membrane and delivers the proteins and the other stuff to the outside of the cell. Golgi apparatus. We have another assembly, and this was going to be a really good video to show you, but unfortunately, the computer's not showing it. This was going to show how in your blood vessel, white blood cells that contain all this stuff, red blood cells float through the stream. White blood cells attach themselves to the wall of the vessels, and they kind of like Velcro. It's like the wall of the blood vessel, and the white blood cell itself has Velcro on it, and these little proteins come out and grab onto each other that are the press and release. It uses the flow of the blood to go through the body and deliver. The fascinating part is if there's an infection, somehow I know T lymphocytes and all that, but we don't know exactly how the communication is relayed. But that white blood cell gets the instructions that there's an infection someplace in the body. So it goes through the blood vessel to a place, and it actually like melts itself. It forms itself into a flat layer and slips itself between the cells of the vessel, and then goes to the area of the infection, right? Now, just to watch that one operation, in the animation is just amazing. You say, all that stuff's going on in my body, those 30-some trillion cells in my body, all these processes are taking place. Yes, space is very interesting to look at, but wow, the fascination of life in our bodies just is amazing. Already went through this, so I'm going to pass through this. So, Darwinism in the era of genetics. There's a doctor by the name of Dean Kenyon, co-authored a book called Biochemical Predestination. Now, this book is still used in universities. The idea was, even though it's been done away with even in science, the idea was that at the molecular level, amino acids would connect themselves together. If you were to put a bunch of, they even stacked the deck when they tried this. They said, okay, we're going to take amino acids that are essential for building a protein. We're going to take just those amino acids and put them in a solution and try different methods of getting them to come together. Well, you know what the problem was? They repelled each other. It never happened. The abiogenesis in that can't happen because the laws that govern the protein, the amino acids, will not interact with each other unless they're put together, right? Through the process of transcription and those things that happen with the RNA and that. But Dr. Kenyon, in the late 60s, when they first were discovering genetics and DNA, he was teaching in his university after he had already authored this book. He was teaching in his university, and one of his students said, how can you believe in this? Because we know that it can't happen without DNA. That DNA has to be part of the process of forming the proteins. And that question bothered him for months until he gave up the idea of his book that he spent so many years researching and helping develop. He come to the point where he said it can't happen at the molecular level without DNA. So first you've got to be able to find out how DNA come into existence before you can find out how proteins come into existence. The information had to be there first. So it's really fascinating. It's a book called Understanding the Mysteries of Life, or it's a video, Understanding the Mysteries of Life. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's very good. Which I was going to show you a video clip, a short one, of the process that goes about through transcription and just the fascinating things that we don't see every day. At least us that aren't involved in the medical field, right? Well, that's a cell right there interacting. I am going to go back and show that to you in just a minute. Let me finish this, and we'll do a little bit different. God is God, and I am not. God's vision is infinite, eternal, and perfect. God's timing is infinite, eternal, and perfect. God's strength is infinite, eternal, and perfect. God's design is infinite, eternal, and perfect. God's love and grace are infinite, eternal, and perfect. And our verse for today was Lord, you have examined me and know all about me. You know when I sit down and when I get up. You know my thoughts before I think them. You know where I go and where I lie down. You know everything I do. Lord, even before I say a word, you already know it. You are all around me, in front and in back, and have put your hand on me. Your knowledge is amazing to me. It is more than I can understand. You made my whole being. You formed me in my mother's body. I praise you because you made me in an amazing and wonderful way. I'm going to show that clip.
The concept of the intelligent design of life was immensely attractive to me and made a great deal of sense, as it very closely matched the multiple discoveries in molecular biology.
In the years since Kenyon's rejection of chemical evolution, science has revealed the details of an entire system of information processing that bears the hallmarks of intelligent design. With computer animation, we can enter the cell to view this remarkable system at work. After entering the heart of the cell, we see the tightly wound strands of DNA, storehouses for the instructions necessary to build every protein in an organism. In a process known as transcription, a molecular machine first unwinds a section of the DNA helix to expose the genetic instructions needed to assemble a specific protein molecule. Another machine then copies these instructions to form a molecule known as messenger RNA. When transcription is complete, the slender RNA strand carries the genetic information through the nuclear pore complex, the gatekeeper for traffic in and out of the cell nucleus. The messenger RNA strand is directed to a two-part molecular factory called a ribosome. After attaching itself securely, the process of translation begins. Inside the ribosome, a molecular assembly line builds a specifically sequenced chain of amino acids. These amino acids are transported from other parts of the cell and then linked into chains often hundreds of units long. Their sequential arrangement determines the type of protein manufactured. When the chain is finished, it is moved from the ribosome to a barrel-shaped machine that helps fold it into the precise shape critical to its function. After the chain is folded into a protein, it is then released and shepherded by another molecular machine to the exact location where it is needed.
This is absolutely mind-boggling to perceive at this scale of size such a finely tuned apparatus, a device that bears the marks of intelligent design and manufacture. And we have the details of an immensely complex molecular realm of genetic information processing. And it's exactly this new realm of molecular genetics where we see the most compelling evidence of design on the Earth.
Isn't that awesome? And that's happening in all the cells of your body. Right? Aren't you glad you don't have to think in order for it to happen? God takes care of it, right? Even down at that level, He's there. All of that, and yes. That's okay. That's all right, we're done. Just go ahead and exit out.